Holy Fist! That's right, we're back with Dungeons & Dragons Character Concept Optimized, where we take two classes and put them together to see what features, both from the classes as well as backgrounds and races, best work together for a min-maxed character build. And today we are doing the Cleric Monk, or as I like to call it, the Holy Fist. Or you could call this the Divine Fist, or the Righteous Hand of God. Anyway, as always, we need to figure out why these two classes are put together. Well, for the pros, the Cleric and the Monk both require wisdom for their abilities. Unarmored defense gives clerics their much-needed armor class, and unarmored movement gets you closer to your allies. And quickly, that way you can heal them when you need to. For cons, monks get to miss out on the necessary key points that are quite necessary for them to use their abilities. So we have to make sure that we have the right amount of levels in Monk to use our Monk abilities. Both Clerics and Monks have features that use the bonus action. Spiritual Weapon, Flurry of Blows, stuff like that. Monks are unarmed, while Clerics are armed. The unarmed strike, mechanically speaking, is not able to benefit from the Cleric's 8th level feature, Divine Strike. This is because, according to the Grand Creators, there is actually a difference between not having a weapon and actually having a weapon. So, yeah, you can't use your Divine Strike, which only affects a weapon attack that you are using against a creature, and your unarmed strikes. Which, that kind of stinks. But there might be something we can do to sort of finagle, to cheat the system. And I think Wizards of the Coast already figured this out and has been updating certain races to make sure that this little cheat cannot be used. I'll get more into that here in a minute. So what are our goals? Well, we need to make sure we have our race, background, monk, both the levels and the subclass. We need to make sure our monk levels are no lower than 10. That way we can have those necessary key points. And we also need to know our cleric levels, our subclass, and our cleric spells. There are two ways we can go about this build. We can either go with another heal bot, which is boring, but the monk cleric is very good at having a heal bot, or as I have dubbed it, the Peace o' Fist. Pacifist, peace, fist. It is a stupid pun, and I apologize for making it. Next is the Fists of Fury. Punch everything that breathes. This is going to be our main damage-dealing build. So we have two different ways of going about this build. Technically, there's a third going with the Monk Way of the Shadows with the Cleric Domain of Twilight. But that's not really an optimal build. Yes, it's a funny, jokey build. Haha, I can create shadows and jump through them, and you can't see where I am, but I see perfectly fine. Yeah, it's kind of funny, it'll annoy your dungeon master, but it's not an optimal build. So we need to find something that is optimal. So let's go ahead and get started by starting with the race. And, by the way, I did have a viewers state a long time ago that they were a little disappointed that I wasn't telling much of a story with these builds. I did with a couple of them, but I wasn't giving a in-game reason a character would multi-class into these two classes. I'm going to change that today, so stay tuned if you're looking for an explanation as to why a monk would become a cleric or a cleric would become a monk. And if you look into IRL, clerics and monks, you'll probably see already how you can meld these two classes together, but I'll save that for the end of the video. Starting things off with our race, we're going to see a very familiar race in these videos, and that is the Vidalcan. Because of their ability Vidalcan Dispassion, which gives us advantage on saving throws with intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Doesn't matter if it's a spell or not, we have advantage on it. But we have a couple of newcomers, that being the Leonin and the Simic hybrid. These two are the sort of cheaty ability that I mentioned earlier, as both the Simic hybrid and the Leonin have a ability that gives them a natural weapon, which you can use to make unarmed strikes. A natural weapon for your unarmed strikes. Now you can probably see where I'm going with this, and we actually get to see this with the Simic hybrid as well. A natural weapon that can be used for your unarmed strikes. This, supposedly, would be perfect for our build, since we are wanting to get access to Divine Strike's extra damage while we're still using our unarmed strikes. Now, Dungeon Masters, be advised here. As of Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse, we have a bunch of races that also used to have this feature get a major update to where they no longer have the natural weapon property on this ability. It is just an unarmed strike that does 1d6 plus your ability modifier. So if you wanted to, Dungeon Masters, you could give your Simic hybrids and Leonins this updated ability, 1d6 plus their strength or dexterity modifier, and that is their unarmed strikes damage. No natural weapon involved. With that being said, let's go ahead and move on, because there are two races here that are a bit odd. We have the Dragonborn, more specifically the Metallic Dragonborn Bronze. And that is because the Metallic Dragonborn have a special ability, which I'll get into here in a second, because we also have the Tabaxi's Feline Agility, which is why I wanted to incorporate it into this build, because that increases our movement speed. We'll go from 30 to 60. But if we incorporate the movement that we get from our monk, we go even faster. From 30 to the monk's increase speed, we'll say 15, so that'll be a 45 movement speed, plus the feline agility will be 90 foot movement speed. So we can go around the battlefield to each of our allies and make sure they are able to be healed. Now, with the Dragonborn, we have the Metallic Breath Weapon, which is a secondary breath weapon that they are able to get at 5th level. And we have two different options here. We have the Innervating Breath, which will incapacitate anybody within the cone if they fail their Constitution save, or Repulsion Breath. Each creature in the cone must succeed on a Strength save or be pushed 20 feet and be knocked prone. This is hilarious when you incorporate a Dragonborn being able to get up into the air and using this ability on flying creatures. They fall out of the sky and hit the ground, taking that sweet, sweet fall damage. But that's why I wanted to incorporate the Dragonborn. Now let's go ahead and move on to our background. And there are two specific backgrounds that I think would work perfectly for this. The Knight of Solamnia, which gives you proficiency in athletics and survival, and you get 2 languages of your choice. But you get the free feat, Squire of Solamnia. The Squire of Solamnia gives you an extra 1d8 damage on your attack roll, which you get after you hit with the attack. Thankfully, Squire of Solamnia gives you the ability to give yourself advantage on this one attack roll. So you gotta keep that in mind. For your Strixhaven student, I recommend going with either the Quandrix or the Prismari. This is because we get the spell Haste at 3rd level thanks to the spell lists of these two. Not only that, but we get some specific spells to start ourselves off at level 1, thanks to the Strixhaven Initiate feat. For Quandrix, this is going to be Druidcraft and Mage Hand for our cantrips, and we get the 1st level spell Shillelagh. For our Prismari, the cantrips would be Firebolt and Ray of Frost, with our 1st level spell being Silvery Barbs. Very useful for when we want to make sure that our enemies fail the saving throw on some of our abilities. And like I said, the Precise Strike ability from Squire of Solamnia gives you advantage on an attack roll, and if the attack hits, you get an extra d8 worth of damage. Very nice. Moving on to the Monk class. There are 2 monastic traditions that I want to go over since we have 2 different builds. The first one is Way of the Ascendant Dragon. This gives us the ability of Draconic Disciple, giving us Draconic Presence, Draconic Strike, and Tongue of the Dragons. Draconic Strike lets us change the damage type of our unarmed strikes to either acid, lightning, fire, or cold. We're going to do lightning. Now, I'm sure some of you players already have a bit of a light bulb moment, but hold that thought, because we still need to be able to get to the rest of these features and our secondary monastic tradition. Other features we have are Breath of the Dragon, Wings Unfurled, which allows us to gain a flying speed when we use Step of the Wind. And we also get Aspect of the Worm, giving us the Frightful Presence ability and Resistance, allowing us to get resistance to 1 damage type of our choice from the 5 that I mentioned earlier: Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning. Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning. That was only 4. Why did I say 5? Anyway. And since we are a 12th level monk, we do have our 12 key points and an extra 20-foot movement speed. We also have Purity of Body and Evasion, and while that's good and all, the main importance here was the key points. We need 12 of them. That's where we can use our Flurry of Blows and Step of the Wind features. And I think Draconic Strike also uses a key point to change the attributes, so we kind of needed those extra key points. Now, our second Monastic tradition is the Way of Mercy. We get Hands of Healing, Hands of Harm, Physician's Touch, and Flurry of Healing and Harm. With Hands of Healing, we can change out our Flurry of Blows unarmed strikes with a Healing Touch. We can restore our target's hit points by 1d8 plus our Wisdom modifier. That is what we were going for our Healing Monk Cleric. And this works beautifully. Of course, since it's a part of the Flurry of Blows, we still need to be able to first hit an enemy with our main attack, so punch an enemy twice, and then give our ally 2 pats on the back. Or give 2 allies each their own pat on the back if they are close by each other. That works. It gives those 2 allies the extra damage that they need on the foe that they're fighting, and it gives them back some of their hit points that they probably lost during that fight. Moving on to our Cleric, we only have 8 levels left in Cleric, so that is perfectly fine, as we get the Divine Strike feature from our Divine Domain, Tempest. As a Tempest Cleric, we get bonus proficiencies in martial weapons and heavy armor. That is useful, not the heavy armor parts, because we're already getting unarmored defense. What is useful is that martial weapons feature, and I'll explain why later. We also get Wrath of the Storm, letting us deal some extra damage. And we get a Channel Divinity, Destructive Wave. The Channel Divinity is really good, but the thing is, we only get 2 uses of our Channel Divinity as of 6th level, per short or long rest. So, yeah, you're probably going to want to take short rests every so often. That's where you can continue to use this feature for each and every combat that you take part in. You only get 2, but it's still good. Why is this good? It is because when you roll for lightning damage, you can use this Channel Divinity to forego the roll and instead do the maximum amount of damage. So if we had our Semic Hybrid Tempest Cleric with the Ascendant Dragon Monk, use 1 key point to change our first unarmed strike into lightning damage, and then attack. Thanks to Divine Strike, we get some extra thunder damage, which is also triggered by Destructive Wrath, by the way. Lightning and thunder damage will become their maximum instead of us having to roll. So, our martial arts die. That is our D8. That is our natural weapon unarmed strike thanks to Semic Hybrid. Plus another D8 thunder damage from Divine Strike. And a D8 from our precise attack, which we get with advantage. So that is 3d8. So, thanks to Destructive Wrath, we instead calculate the maximum damage. So that'll be 8 plus 8 plus 8. 24 damage. Plus, of course, our dexterity modifier, which will probably be a +4 by the end of this build. So that is 28 points of damage on the first hit. And Destructive Wrath automatically pushes the target back. Actually, I think that was for Thunderous Strike. They move back 10 feet, so that is grand. More pushback. Additionally, our Dragonborn's breath weapon is lightning damage, which is at 17th level, 4d10. So we can use our Channel Divinity to do the maximum on that breath weapon. Grand total of 40 damage. Not 4d10, 40. That is amazing. While yes, this was more for the use of spells or the magic item Javelin of Lightning, it still works perfectly for this ability. Now, granted, we have to use this when we roll damage. It does not last the entire turn. That is the only downside to this Cleric domain. On that attack damage. So at best, only going to be able to do this twice. And if we're lucky, our precise attack will land us a critical hit. That means we are doing twice as much damage dice. That is 6d8. So instead of 24 as our maximum, it will instead be 48 as our maximum, plus the dexterity modifier, giving us a grand total of 52. Not bad. Not as good as being able to hit multiple enemies with 40 damage, but it's still pretty good. Now for our healing cleric, the Divine Domain of Peace works wonderfully because of their channel divinity, Balm of Peace. Just by walking up to one of our allies, we can give them some of their hit points back. So we use our channel divinity, walk up to one of our allies, or two of our allies, they get back their hit points, we smack an enemy, and then give both of them pats on the back with our Way of Mercy, and there you go. More heals. That is a lot of healing. Peace and mercy. It kind of works well together, do you think? Alright, now that we have gotten everything together, let's go ahead and take a look at our feats. I'm going to say the Elemental Adept of Lightning will be perfect for our Ascendant Dragon. This will make sure that our opponents do not have resistance to lightning damage. The second one is going to be Great Weapon Master. Thanks to the Monk feature of Dedicated Weapon, we are able to make one weapon we are proficient with and turn it into a monk weapon. The Battle Axe and the Longsword are the two weapons that would work perfectly with this build, because Dedicated Weapon specifies that it cannot be a heavy weapon or a special property weapon, and these are the only two that deal the most damage out of those weapons. Otherwise, there would be no point. We'll just have to use a normal monk weapon, which will give us a D8 thanks to our martial arts die. For our healer, the mobile feat and the chef feat will work perfectly, as the mobile feat will give us some extra movement speed, and the chef feat gives us another way to heal our allies. So that's why I chose those two feats. Now that we've gone over the feats, let's go ahead and take a look at our final calculations. For our Bronze Dragonborn, we will get the background of the Knight of Solemnia, giving our precise attack extra damage, 1d8. We'll go 12 levels into Monk, having a martial arts die of a d8. Our monastic tradition will be Way of the Ascendant Dragon, giving us our lightning damage attack for our unarmed strikes. We will also have our level 8 Cleric be a Tempest Domain, giving us access to Destructive Wave. This way, our Draconic Breath will be able to deal its grand total of maximum damage, 40 lightning damage. And we will also have the Thunderous Strike feature, letting our lightning damage knock opponents back. And we also have Divine Strike for when we do want to be able to deal some extra damage with a weapon attack, such as the Battle Axe or Longsword that I mentioned a little bit ago. Speaking of, we will have the Elemental Adept, lightning damage, and the Great Weapon Master feat, giving us access to a bit more power. Second build. With Tabaxi as our race, we'll go with the background of the Prismari student. We'll get the feature of the Prismari Initiate, giving us access to the Cantrip Firebolt and Ray of Frost, as well as Silvery Barbs. We'll get 12 levels of Monk, Way of Mercy, and we'll go with 8 levels of Cleric, Domain of Peace, giving us that sweet, sweet healing. And for our feats, we are going with Chef and Healer. And as promised, I will now give you a reason for a monk to go into cleric or a cleric to go into monk. Much like in the real world, monastic traditions for monks and clergy are pretty similar. They're very interchangeable, such as the way of the Buddhists or with the Catholic Church. They're almost similar. It's almost uncanny how their practices are so similar. So it would make sense for a monk-cleric combination just by that standpoint alone. But in Dungeons & Dragons, we actually have a better excuse, especially with a dragon-based deity. We have Bahamut, who he himself does take the form of a human from time to time. And he even got himself the moniker of the Grand Master of Flowers, a very special title for monks. So it would make sense for him to be teaching his ways to other followers, to some of these followers of his. So, Bahamut, being a dragon god, which would connect our Dragonborn to the Tempest Domain Cleric, would follow the teachings of the Grandmaster of Flowers, who is Bahamut, a ascendant dragon. Now, the exact opposite is true with Tiamat, who also has a humanoid form in Takesis. Now, the Dragonborn could technically be a Bozak, a Draconian, which I think you can try to get your Dungeon Master to flavor this as such. I think it would make sense. But Takesis, aka Tiamat, is herself a dragon deity. So it makes sense for her followers to follow the way of the Ascendant Dragon. And since she is a goddess of dragons, that also ties into the Tempest Domain Cleric. And I don't think I'd have to go into an exclamation for the Prismari student's background. Since the Prismari College is all about the arts of magic, it makes sense to have the Way of Mercy and a Cleric Domain of Peace to mingle together in order to create fantastical art. Much like how the college professor, the Elder Dragon Prismari, would like, would teach. And there you go. That is the end of the build, but not quite end of the video, as we still have our cleric spells to go over. We get 4 cantrips. Sacred Flame, Spare the Dying, Thaumaturgy, and Toll the Dead are the cantrips that I recommend. For your first level spells, we have Ceremony, Command, Guiding Bolt, Healing Word, and Shield of Faith. You can change those spells out for whichever spells you find more appropriate, of course. Second level, we have Hold Person, Prayer of Healing, and Silence. Third level, Animate Dead, Revivify, and Spirit Guardians. And for your fourth level spell, we have Banishment. And with that being said, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. I'll see you all again next time for when we do this again. Until then, this has been Drehan, and I am offline.